Hi, y'all. Welcome back to Lit Whiskey Wednesday, where the lit stands for literature. As always, this is your host, Adrian Martinez, coming to you live from Studio B. We are on episode 4 of season 1, which feels absolutely crazy to say. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you. All of y'all that have subscribed on Spotify, that follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok, leave likes, leave comments, all of that is just amazing. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you, honestly, does not feel like enough, but it's all I can do for right now. You guys are amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. With that being said, let's hop on today's pairing, and I think it's going to be a really cool one. On the page, we have a classic. This book is kind of forced onto kids when they're in high school, and I understand why, but let me clarify. I understand why now as an adult, when I'm going back and reading it not because I have to for class, but because I wanted to read it. This book is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. To Kill a Mockingbird, surprisingly enough, is the only book that Harper Lee published. And after getting a movie with a star like Gregory Peck, you would think that Harper Lee would utilize that as almost like a bouncing point to continue writing and to publish more novels, but she didn't. To Kill a Mockingbird is such a powerful novel that she only needed the one to become the author that she was, the inspiration that she was. Just with that one book in her resume was all the experience that she needed to win the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1961. If you go to any bookstore, you will find another book called Go Set a Watchman, but this is actually really interesting. I stayed up last night reading about her and reading about the book, and this book, Go Set a Watchman, technically is a sequel to Kill a Mockingbird, but it really isn't, and let me tell you why. Go Set a Watchman was her first draft, or one of her early drafts of To Kill a Mockingbird, so it has the same characters, and maybe a slightly different version of them. What I understand is it is initially set in later years when our main character is an adult. And then, through flashbacks, we get the story that is in To Kill a Mockingbird. So, it really is To Kill a Mockingbird version 1. To Kill a Mockingbird is version 2. And to me, that's crazy because, like I said, that's all she needed. She just needed the one. She needed the one story. It's not just because it's good, and let me preface, it's good. It's really good. So much so that I told my wife when I finished it, I don't want to force my kids to read anything, but this is one of those books that I'm going to highly, highly encourage if school doesn't, because it makes you think. Like The Giver that we talked about last week, it makes you think about the message. Because To Kill a Mockingbird, as a book, is quiet, but it says a lot. It doesn't shout its message. It trusts that you will understand it. In case you've never read To Kill a Mockingbird, let me give you a little summary of what it's about. The story follows a young girl named Scout Finch in the American South during the 30s, as she and her brother Jem go through the small town of live in the small town of Alabama. They're raised by their single father, Atticus Finch, who's a lawyer known for having a strong moral character and not bending to the will of others. The main conflict of the book comes up when Atticus defends a black man named Tom Robinson, who is falsely accused of assaulting a white woman. As the trial unfolds, Scout begins to seize the reality of prejudice, injustice, and moral courage. Through her experience, the book explores themes of empathy, integrity, and doing what's right, even when it goes against societal norms or against the beliefs of the community around you. This book, for me personally, it's kind of hard to label it because if you look online, you will find genres associated to the book like Southern Gothic, mystery, thriller, and to tell you the truth, I don't necessarily agree with those labels. I think the closest thing I could say about the book is that it's contemporary. It tells the story of Atticus Finch and his family as they're living in Macomb, Alabama, having to deal with the judgy eyes of their entire community because they all think that this man, Thomas Robinson, did the things that he's accused of. And just because of that, they all already automatically hate this family. And that is just absolutely horrible. So I think contemporary is maybe the best label for this type of story, but I don't think there is a perfect label. But what I can say is that the story is beautifully told and has a very strong, very powerful message about doing what's right and standing up for what you believe in. For this pairing, I am going to mainly focus on Atticus Finch. As a single dad, he was mainly concerned with his family, didn't give two thoughts to the other people in the community that called them a variety of negative names that I am not going to repeat on this podcast. Go read the book, or I guess listen to the audiobook. But he didn't give a single thought to these people that were being very negative towards him. That he was mainly concerned with, one, taking care of his family, and two, helping Thomas Robinson, who was falsely accused of assaulting a white woman. Atticus Finch, in this book, symbolizes moral integrity and moral strength, standing up for what you believe in, doing what's right, and not concerning yourself with others' opinions, especially when others' opinions come from a place of hatred and bigotry. As I would like to quote one of my favorite shows, a lion does not concern himself with the opinions of sheep. He as a character is not flashy, but he doesn't need to be. His strengths and integrity alone are enough for people to know that he is a force to be reckoned with, and is also the defender of those that are not able to defend themselves. Which, I know it's a bit of a bumper sticker, but that is what leads me to today's pairing. Today's whiskey is none other than Colonel E.H. Taylor. Before I hop onto the why E.H. Taylor is a perfect pairing for To Kill a Mockingbird, let me talk about the whiskey for a little bit. It is owned by Buffalo Trace Distillery, which we talked about in the last episode, and it is one of those bourbons that is universally known and universally loved for its high quality. It does not need to have any deeper layer other than bourbon for it to be good. It stands at 100 proof, and it has the color of almost like a caramel, but not as intense. It can be sometimes harder to find. That's why E.H. Taylor, just like Weller, the one that we talked about last week, they both serve as an introduction to whiskey hunters. It was actually recently brought up to me by one of my listeners, Tom. Great guy, great kickball player. That's how I met him, and fantastic listener. Does not miss an episode and makes sure to leave a comment on every episode. He is the type of fan that you always want. So, shout out to Tom. But yeah, Tom mentioned to me earlier this week that it could be a good idea to mention where you could find these whiskeys and the general price point. So E.H. Taylor, because it is slightly harder to find, it can be tricky. Sometimes when you find them at a chain store like a Specs or a Total Wine, the MSRP is somewhere between $40 to $50, maybe $60. I have seen E.H. Taylor in mom and pop shops, and if you can support mom and pop shops, please do. That's awesome. But I have seen them in mom and pop shops marked up to like $200-$300. So they are available at that 40 to 50, maybe 60 price point. But I personally would go up to like 60, maybe 70 if I was feeling frivolous. But I would not go above $70. I would stick to, honestly, ideally 50 to 60, maybe 70 on a good day. But that's the approximate price point for this bottle. On the note, actually, oh man, I love that sound. I don't know about y'all, but that is an absolute beautiful sound. Oh yeah, no, the color is a little darker than honey, a little lighter than caramel. It's hard to describe, but it's really pretty. On the nose, you get those typical bourbon senses. Like I mentioned earlier, E.H. Taylor is not flashy. Like Atticus Finch, it is not a flashy bourbon, but what it does incredibly well. Let me preface by saying, when I'm talking about E.H. Taylor, I'm talking about the small batch, the entry level bottle, because they have multiple different bottles. They have a rye, they have a bottled in bond. I think they have a hurricane version that survived a hurricane. They have an amaranth version that I would love to get my hands on, but I don't have like $1,000 just laying around. But yeah, like I said, on the nose, it gets those typical bourbon scents that we were talking about last week. So that caramel, vanilla, it is a little bit of a little oaky, and has more of a punch because it is a slightly higher proof than the other whiskeys that we've talked about. So like Buffalo Trace, I think it's 80 proof. Weller, I think it's 80 proof, and Von Payne, I think it's 90 proof. I'm not 1,000% sure on that one, but E.H. Taylor is coming at 100, so it has a bit more of a punch. On the palate, very oaky. Very oaky, and it's not until a little later that you are able to get that vanilla and that caramel. And, actually, there's a note there that I hadn't picked up before. Almost like a tobacco. It's not unpleasant though. It's actually really nice. I could see this bourbon being paired really nicely with a cigar. I wish I could tell you which one. I don't smoke cigars, so I would not be able to point you in the right direction. If anybody has any suggestions, please feel free to drop a comment. I recently found out that you can comment on episodes of podcasts on Spotify, so please feel free to do so. You can also leave a comment on our Instagram, which is lit_whiskey_Wednesday. Honestly, if I were to summarize E.H. Taylor, if it were a person, it wouldn't be the loudest in the room, but definitely the most respected. It would definitely know the difference between 2, 2, and 2, and would, when it gets a chance, correct your grammar. So, why does this bourbon remind me of Atticus Finch? Well, I'm so glad you asked. E.H. Taylor was a real person. Colonel Edmund Hayes Taylor Jr., aka the father of modern bourbon. This man was an absolute legend. So, for starters, Colonel Taylor was related to two presidents of the United States, President Zachary Taylor and James Madison. He was related to Zachary Taylor because he was his parental grand uncle, and James Madison was his maternal great-great-grandfather. So, off the bat, I think that's just really cool. But to take things into a bit of a further detail, Colonel Taylor was the person that modernized bourbon making. One of his primary concerns was consumer rights. Back in those days, distilleries were adding God knows what into their whiskeys just to give them a different aspect. They were adding things to make them seem older or maybe darker in color, just to make them more visually appealing to the consumer. The problem is that some of the things that they were adding were things like chewed tobacco, iodine, or even formaldehyde. And this was just to make them seem a little older or a little more aged. But think about what people were putting into their bodies, and they had no idea. So Colonel Taylor was one of the main advocates for the Bottled in Bond Act of 1897, which accomplished a few different things. One, it ensured that nothing was added to the bourbon other than the grain, the water, and that's it. Another thing that the act did was set quality standards for the entire industry. So one thing, for example, was that the words in the label had to mean something. They couldn't just be buzzwords. So, for example, the words single malt whiskey tells you where it comes from, it tells you what's in it, and it tells you what it is. Well, duh, whiskey. So, for example, single means that it comes from a single distillery, and malt is the grain, so like malted barley. So they couldn't add like supercalifristic something alioshous whiskey because that means absolutely nothing. Another thing that it accomplished was the quality control of bourbon. It ensured that there was a fixed strength, a minimum aging requirement, and a single source requirement. All of these things to ensure that the quality of bourbon was upheld industry-wide. Not only that, but Colonel Taylor was also one of the people that helped revolutionize the bourbon industry in the United States. Well, no duh, bourbon has to be from the United States. But he's one of the people that helped revolutionize it, not just from a legal standpoint, but also from a production standpoint. So he helped with the innovation of like steam heating systems, of copper fermentation tanks. He improved column stills, and let's just pretend that I didn't read that off the list. I just had that, on the top of my head. So Colonel Taylor was the man when it came to bourbon. He was a person that had consumers' best interests in mind, especially at a time where people were going about the wrong ways of quote unquote improving their product. He stood up for what was right for not just himself, not just for his pocket, but for the health of the consumer.
Both the bottle and the book remind you that doing things the right way doesn't always stand out, but it lasts.
Another reason why I'm associating E.H. Taylor to Atticus Finch is because the bottle just it looks like it belongs inside of a lawyer's office. It's pretty. It says elegant without flashiness. And I genuinely think that you could look at a lawyer's liquor cabinet and find a bottle like this. So I do have a bit of an anecdote about this bottle, and it's less of an anecdote and more of a story. So gather around, kids. The first time I tried it was at the Buffalo Trace tasting that I spoke about last week. They were giving Buffalo Trace, they were giving the bourbon cream I talked about, they were giving a vodka. Who knew that they made vodka? But the last product that they gave to sample was Colonel E.H. Taylor, and it stood out. My father in law, he's born and raised Kentuckian. He lives and breathes the bluegrass. That sounded wrong. Sorry, Ricky. So I remember they're pouring the last one, and he looks at me and he says, "Oh, I don't drink a whole lot, but that's good." So I knew I had to have it as soon as I saw a bottle. And I, for some reason, had the urge to save it. I got home and I just put it away, and my wife looked at me and said, "I'm not gonna try it." And I said, "No, I don't think I'm worthy." And I think she might have tried to smack me in the back of the head. I don't know. Not saying I didn't deserve it. I probably did, but that's besides the point. Anyways, no, that was a complete joke. My wife doesn't smack me in the back of the head. Anyways, I knew I had to save it for a reason, and then it hit me. My friends were getting married in like 4 months from then, and I knew that we needed that bottle to celebrate. So I texted him and I said, "Hey, next time that I go over, I have a bottle. I have something special that we're gonna use to celebrate for your wedding." So he had a friend or two there. I showed up, and I told them, this was a first. This was honestly one of the first bottles I shared with my father-in-law. I I shared like 5 different ones in that tasting, but I promise you I'm not an alcoholic. But anyways, we shared those 5 in the tasting, but that was the one that stood out to him, so it was special to me. Anyways, I told them the story, and I told them I want to share it with y'all as a way to celebrate your wedding. And a little side note, I actually got to officiate their wedding. So that just makes this bottle that much more special. I got to share it with my father-in-law, which phenomenal person. I love my father-in-law. I actually joke around with my wife that if we ever get separated, I get to keep her dad. But this was the first bottle that I really got to share with him. And the same bottle, well, not really the same bottle, the same whiskey, I got to share with my friends to celebrate their wedding. So this bottle will always have a special place in my heart and my liver. But that is all that I have for y'all today. Thank you again to everyone that listens, everyone that's followed, everyone that's subscribed, everyone that leaves comments. They all mean the world to me. Thank you again for all the support. It is very, very encouraging, and it just means the world to me. Remember to leave a like, follow, leave a review. All of that is highly appreciated, and it means the world to me. Oh my gosh, how many times have I said that this episode? I'm sorry, I'm just so filled with gratitude towards all of y'all. But as I've recorded this episode, I heard myself say it 1,000 times. So man, if I had a shot for every time I said I appreciate it or it means the world to me, I think I'd be so drunk that I'd be talking to the wall, thinking that it was Colonel Taylor himself. And the worst thing is, I think the wall would be talking back. And what I'm starting to wonder is, what would the wall be saying back? I think I have 2 different ideas. One, the wall would be telling me, please shave your head. You're starting to look ridiculous. You're going bald. You started going bald 5 years ago. Please, it's time. Man, that really says how I feel about it. Or two, it would say, hey, please, pretty please, stop throwing your D20s at me every time that you have a bad roll on D&D. Learn to take a nat 1 like an adult. But anyways, this is Adrian Martinez coming to you live from Studio B. Thanks again for listening to Lit Whiskey Wednesday, where the lit stands for literature. Catch y'all on the next one.